Okay, so whatever happened to encumbrance in D&D? Like, did it just disappear? Or I guess in 5e people just don't care about it anymore. I mean, there's certainly rules for encumbrance, and there's even like variable rules, like variations on the encumbrance rules. And I think somewhere along the way, it sort of gotten thrown out. Like, people just don't seem that concerned about it anymore. And it's really fascinating to me because, coming from playing D&D through basically all the versions, I didn't play much of 3.5, but back in like just basic, advanced, and second edition, especially most of my experience coming from second edition, this was sort of the thing of like, there was almost that like ridiculous sort of like, we wouldn't have called it that then, but that sort of meme or that, that iconic image of like the fighter with like 20 weapons that they're carrying, like packs and sacks and bags and whatever, and then this poor wretched magic user, wizard, whatever, could barely carry his own staff and cloak, and it seems like we've kind of almost done away with that. For better or for worse, I don't know. It just occurred to me today that like, whatever happened to encumbrance? Like, I think most people, like, I know for myself, in the games that I run nowadays, I generally feel like this. Like, unless you're heavily encumbered, I don't really want to be bothered with it. So like, if we know you just raided some, horde, like you just took out the Goblin King and all of his copper and silver and whatnot and gold and whatever you find are in like, and maybe art and like jewelry and whatever, just all the stuff you're gonna find, the treasure hoard is in like crates and boxes or maybe in a big giant treasure chest. Like, carrying that is gonna be a burden, right? Like, who's gonna carry all that stuff? Or are you gonna have to make multiple trips? Or maybe everybody just figures like, well, by second or third level you'll probably have a bag of holding, so who cares? I mean, on some level I kind of care. I guess this sort of ties in with like ammunition. Like, if you're an archer, if you're a ranger or a fighter that focuses on archery, bows or crossbows or what have you, do you track your ammunition? And if you do, how do you do it? Like, these are these weird questions that like sort of, I feel like in the current version of 5e that a lot of us are playing, especially when it's being popularized by all these great, wonderful shows on the web, whether it's Twitch or YouTube or podcast form or what have you, people seem to be more interested in the heroics of the game or the horror of the game if you're playing like Curse of Strahd or whatever theme your game has. I suppose that on some level, the theme, the story, the role-playing, for a lot of people, that has become much more important and fun than crunching numbers. For me, for old school players, a lot of us were into the number crunching part of the game, and plenty of others were not. Plenty of others could care less about the number crunching. They were more interested in, again, the story and just having a good time at a table with friends. So for those of us that do enjoy the number crunching, I kind of, in a very small way, in a very, very small way, I kind of feel like something is lost when we just like throw encumbrance out and don't really focus or think about it anymore. But really, is it? I mean, I don't seem to notice it when we don't count, how much we're carrying. I try to be sensible about it. I try to be like logical. For instance, if I start a game at a higher level and I've got a little bit of coin, and I know, especially if I know I'm playing a character that does not have a very high strength, what I tend to do is I tend to buy myself 50 feet of silk rope to replace the hempen rope, because silk rope it's lighter. It saves you a bunch of weight. And even then, I also will tend to go as far as like rations in 5e are actually pretty darn heavy. Like it's like, I think it's like a pound per day or something crazy. So I figure, you know, do you really need 10 torches? Maybe just like 2 or 5 is enough. So things like torches and rations and all of that stuff, like if you really need 10 days of rations, you can do it. But to save a little bit of weight, why not only carry half as many? You know, here's a funny side note. I am an old-time backpacker. I've been backpacking most of my life. I don't do it all the time, so I wouldn't say I'm an avid backpacker, but I love backpacking. And over the last few years, I actually, let's say half a decade or something, or a decade at the very most, yeah, not even, like 4 or 5 years, I got into ultralight backpacking, to where you're like your pack for all your stuff is like 30 pounds or something crazy light like that, you know, or less if you can do it. And that's with like loads of gear. So here are these adventurers with leather backpacks and hempen rope and like like torches and this and that. I mean, it's legitimate to have a fighter or a paladin or a ranger or somebody who, it could be a wizard, if any character that has high strength, it's a legitimate thing for them to be carrying like 100 pounds of gear, as that's their gear that they're carrying. That's a lot of damn weight. So yeah, so it's really interesting. It just occurred to me today, like, you know, maybe it'd be interesting to just think about encumbrance for a moment. So, like, do you use an alternate encumbrance, or do you just not track it at all? I guess for me, for most of the games I've been running, as I said a moment ago, I sort of think, like, unless you're heavily encumbered, it's not going to affect your speed or any of that kind of stuff, right? Unless you find something big, like there's a chest of coins that you have to like cart out of a dungeon or something. Then we would probably have a discussion about, well, how are you really going to manage this? I think a lot of times in most parties, like I think in the party that I'm running for on when we're doing the Kingdom of Magic or the Princes of the Apocalypse, there's 2, of course, but the main one that I've been running for the longer period of time, they for certain have a bag of holding, and I know Michelle is really good about tracking our items, and it makes it easy because then she knows, like, there's a limit. I think it's 500 pounds for the bag of holding, right? So she knows if the weight for the bag of holding gets to be 500 or more, then we just go, okay, well, we got to ditch some stuff. And she's been real good about that. So I know a lot of people tend to maybe do it that way, whether you're in Roll20 or maybe there's probably something similar you can do in Fantasy Grounds, although I'm not familiar with that, but for sure we do that in Roll20, or even just pencil and paper and sort of like doing your sums that way, or spreadsheet or whatever works for you, I guess. So that's sort of how we've kind of, I think, basically dealt with, like, everybody's got their gear that they can manage, you know, depending on what their class is and that kind of thing. And beyond that, it all sort of goes into the group loot and then gets thrown into usually a bag of holding, which solves the big issue. So I don't know. I mean, do you have another solution? Do you guys even care anymore? Does anyone care anymore about encumbrance? Or is this just like some lost thing that's really doesn't even need to be brought up in the game at all? I don't know. It's something fun to think about. That's what I was thinking about today. I'll think about more crazy stuff tomorrow. Keep rolling 20s until then. And remember, it's your game, so play your way. If you're playing like Curse of Strahd or something like that, or even, you know, if you're playing the oh gosh, now I can't even think of it. What's the one with the Spider Queen where you're in the Underdark? I gotta pause the video.